It is a great pleasure and privilege for me to be able to introduce Archbishop Paul Gallagher to give us an official greeting and speak to us on this issue. Archbishop Gallagher is the Vatican Secretary of Relations with States. He was born in Liverpool, England, and attended St. Francis Xavier's College in Woolton. Throughout his life of service to the Catholic Church, he has held positions around the world in Tanzania, Uruguay, the Philippines, the Vatican Secretariat of State, and at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. He also served as nuncio to Guatemala in 2009. In 2012, he was appointed by Pope Benedict XVI as papal nuncio to Australia, where he served until Pope Francis appointed him to his current position in November 2014. Your Excellency, we're honored to have you with us to begin our conference. Thank you very much for being here.
So I didn't put myself up there to make a big entrance. It was the only seat I could find. And I walked down slowly because I didn't want to be like President Ford, who was accused of not being able to chew gum and walk straight at the same time. Despite the impressive introduction that was given to me by Dr. Shah, I wasn't the first choice for this job. So I do bring you greetings from His Eminence Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Cardinal Secretary of State of Pope Francis, who is actually spending the day with the other cardinal councillors with the Holy Father. Your Beatitudes, Your Eminence, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. A number of years ago, a Holy See diplomat, newly assigned to Iraq, and yet to take up his assignment there, was surprised that many people concerned and worried for his well-being and safety as he prepared to set off for a war-torn country. They posed the question, but why are they sending you there? Surely there aren't any Catholics there. I share with you that experience to illustrate that a good proportion of ordinary Catholics and Christians in the West, perhaps even the majority of them, have little knowledge about the reality of the presence of Christians in the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. Moreover, if we do not know who our Christian brothers and sisters are and what they are experiencing, how can we have a sense of solidarity with them? It is a sad reality that the persecution felt by Christians in the Middle East and elsewhere is magnified by their sense of abandonment by their Christian brothers and sisters in the West. Unfortunately, since that question was posed, the plight of Christians and of other communities in the Middle East has deteriorated even more dramatically, especially with the establishment of the so-called Caliphate of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria in June 2014. It is a sad reality that war and radical Islamic extremism that has transmogrified into brutal totalitarianism, not to mention the underlying circumstances that had already caused many Christians to emigrate, threatens the very survival of Christianity in the Middle East. How do we respond to this lack of knowledge about Christians who are living literally under the threat of the sword? The first step is education. Educating ourselves with the facts on the ground by reaching out and listening to our persecuted brothers and sisters, so that our ears and eyes may be opened to their plight. Thus, we are honored today by the presence of His Beatitude, Louis Raphael I Sacco, Chaldean Patriarch, and His Beatitude, Ignatius Yusuf III Yunan, Syrian Catholic Patriarch, who will share with us the situation of Christians in the Middle East. However, their presence here today will be in vain if we do not open our hearts to their words, to move ourselves, firstly, to a profound spiritual solidarity with the suffering of our Christian brothers and sisters by praying unceasingly for them. And secondly, along with our prayers, we must double our efforts of responding to the humanitarian needs of the thousands and thousands of Christians who will shortly spend a second Christmas unable to return to their homes and homeland. As Christians in the West, we take for granted the liberties we enjoy, even though they are increasingly under threat in so many imperceptible ways, that we are unaware of the challenges that Christians and religious minorities in other parts of the world face on a daily basis. Therefore, I warmly welcome the initiative under Caesar's sword, jointly sponsored by the Center for Civil and Human Rights at the University of Notre Dame and the Religious Freedom Project at Georgetown University's Berkley Center for Religion, Peace and World Affairs. This initiative addresses the lack of knowledge that I have spoken about by putting together a team of academic researchers who will scientifically document the ways in which Christian communities around the world are persecuted and denied religious freedom. Knowledge is the first step to solidarity. I'm also pleased to note that the findings of the research of the initiative will be used to create a range of materials to sensitize schools and churches about the plight of Christians who live under Caesar's sword. Over the next few days, during the course of this conference, many of the experts and researchers involved in the initiative will share their findings. Despite the secular age in which we are living, the religious spirit still beats in the heart of humanity. In some, religion is alive and well in the 21st century, to paraphrase the phrase attributed to Mark Twain on learning that his death had been reported in the newspapers. The demise of religion has been greatly exaggerated. Religion remains an important, if not essential, element of the human condition. In his message for the 1999 World Day of Peace, Pope John Paul II stated that religious freedom constituted the very heart of human rights, while Pope Benedict XVI, in his message for the 2011 World Day of Peace, underscored the special status of religious freedom among the fundamental rights and freedoms rooted in the dignity of the human, since religious freedom expresses what is unique about the human person, for it allows us to direct our personal and social life to God, in whose light the identity, meaning, and purpose of the person are fully understood. To deny or arbitrarily restrict this freedom is to foster a reductive vision of the human person. To eclipse the public role of religion is to create a society which is unjust, inasmuch as it fails to take account of the true nature of the human person. It is to stifle the growth of the authentic and lasting peace of the whole human family. End of quotation. Benedict XVI rightly raised the alarm of worrying signs about the restrictions on the rights of believers to freedom of conscience and freedom of religion. As believers, we believe that all human beings have been created in the image and likeness of a heavenly creator. Thus, the very dignity of humanity is founded on a primordial relationship with a transcendent reality. This relationship is the basis for all human striving for justice, goodness, and truth. Human rights, founded on the dignity of the human person, therefore, necessarily recognize the primacy of the religious freedom among the rights due to humanity. It is for this reason that the Second Vatican Council, in its Declaration on Religious Freedom, Dignitatis Humanae, considered the free exercise of religion to be the first of the demands for freedom in human society. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights similarly recognized and acknowledged the primacy of religious freedom among human rights. The Canadian scholar John Humphrey, who prepared the first draft of the Declaration, wrote, "Freedom of religion is indeed the oldest of the internationally recognized human freedoms and therefore the one with which the international community has had the longest experience. End of quotation. I apologize if some of the things I'm now going to say are a slight repetition of what Dr. Shaw said about Dignitatis Humanae. It is appropriate that this conference is taking place here in Rome on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the declaration of the Second Vatican Council, Dignitatis Humanae. That document was preceded only 2 years previously by the encyclical letter Pacem in Terris of Pope St. John XXIII, foundational document in the modern era of the Church's magisterium on human rights. Pacem in Terris was notable for being also addressed to all people of goodwill. It listed among the rights of man the right to worship God in accordance with the right dictates of his own conscience and to profess his religion both in private and public. Of all the conciliar documents, Dignitatis Humanae was the only one where the Council stated explicitly its intention to develop the doctrine of recent popes on the inviolable rights of the human person and the constitutional order of society. The first 3 words of the declaration, Dignitatis Humanae Personae, succinctly states that all human rights, including religious freedom, are based on the dignity of the human person, and consequently those rights are antecedent and inviolable. Originally, the first draft of the Declaration on Religious Freedom was drawn up by the Secretariat for Christian Unity. Thus, it was thought that religious freedom would be a chapter in the Decree on Humanism. In choosing, however, for a separate and distinct declaration in the context of the fundamental rights that belong to all human beings, the Council affirmed that fundamental rights and freedom, including the right to religious freedom, depend on the dignity of the human person. A key moment during the pontificate of Pius XII was his Christmas radio message of 1942, which we had reference to earlier. In his message, Pius XII placed renewed emphasis on the dignity of the individual human person, who is the subject of fundamental and inalienable rights which are derived from his nature as an intelligent and free being. I quote, "Whosoever wishes that the star of peace should appear and shine over society must maintain respect for the fundamental rights of the person, the right to maintain and develop intellectual and moral life, and particularly the right to a religious formation and education, the right to worship God in private and in public, including performing acts of religious charity." End of quotation. In the context of the message, notable for its condemnation of the extermination of people on the basis of race, it is clear that Pius XII considered the right to religious freedom as belonging to believers of all religious faiths, and in fact it was widely interpreted as such at the time. Similarly, the encyclical letter Pacem in Terris assumed that the right of religious freedom pertained to all believers, whether Catholic or not. The same assumption is also found in Pope Paul VI's address at the opening of the second session of the Council, when he lamented the denial of religious freedom and other fundamental rights of man in various countries. Thus, to defend human rights, it is essential to defend religious freedom. And to defend religious freedom, we must educate ourselves about the threats to religious freedom, about their causes, and how best to respond to them. On the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1988, Pope John Paul II addressed the participants of the Colloquium on the Church and Human Rights, which was organized in that year by the Pontifical Commission Justitia et Pax. And he spoke of an apostolate of human rights, whereby the Church might carry out in a concrete way the teaching of the encyclical Pacem in Terris and of the Second Vatican Council, as well as the principles universally recognized following the Declaration of 1948. The Holy See, through its diplomatic action in the international community, is committed to this apostolate of human rights, and it seeks, through political, cultural, and interreligious dialogue, the promotion and respect for all human rights that are founded on the inherent dignity of the human person. Why focus on the persecution of Christians? This is a reasonable question to ask. As I've already highlighted, the Church's magisterium over the past 50 years has explicitly defended religious freedom for all believers as an integral part of defending human rights. We are well aware that Christians are not the only ones who suffer persecution in the world. There are many religious communities, including minority sects, who experience persecution or repression that may be state-sponsored or societal in nature. There is a case, however, to focus on the persecution of Christians, because unfortunately it seems to be on the rise. A number of studies have suggested that Christians are the victims of 80% of all acts of religious discrimination in the world. What's more, for various reasons, it seems to go largely unreported. But there is much more important reason why we should focus on Christian persecution. As Christians, we have a special duty in charity to our fellow Christians. It is an opportunity for solidarity with them, and by learning about their heroic witness in the face of persecution and suffering, we can learn to become better Christians ourselves. Before the General Assembly of the United Nations last September, Pope Francis renewed his calls and concern on behalf of Christians and other believers who are persecuted for their beliefs. The Pope said, "For this reason, while regretting to have to do so, I must renew my repeated appeals regarding to the painful situation of the entire Middle East, North Africa, and other African countries where Christians, together with other cultural or ethnic groups, and even members of the majority religion who have no desire to be caught up in hatred and folly, have been forced to witness the destruction of their places of worship, their cultural and religious heritage, their houses and property, and have faced the alternative either of fleeing or of paying for their adhesion to good and to peace by their own lives or by enslavement." And so I wish this conference every success, God's blessing upon your deliberations, and that you may indeed, the fruit may be abundant for the benefit of our persecuted and suffering brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.